Hi, so this is a video about for loops. Now, for loops are really important in creative coding because they enable you to do things lots of times automatically, things that repeat a lot. So if you want to draw 100 or something, for instance, it's going to be a lot easier using a for loop, which will enable you to draw lots of things rather than typing the same thing out lots and lots of times. Now, we've talked about conditional statements, we've talked about variables as well, and for loops are kind of build upon that knowledge. Now, let's start by looking at for loops in P5. So first of all, let's see why we want to do it. Now, we've got a circle here. It's at 200, 200, x, y, and it's 20. The size of it's 20. So let's draw one at, let's say 20, 20. And we want another one that's 60 pixels away from this, say over here a bit, so then let's add 60 to that, so we get 80. Well, that's a bit too much. What about 40? 40 would be touching it, so we want to have 60. Yeah, there we go, 40. 40 away from it. Okay, then let's just copy this line and paste lots of them. Make this a bit smaller. Paste a few more. So, okay. Now, deep breath, add 40 each time, so 100. And one adds, we're adding, yep, so 140. And we got 180. This is, as you can see, incredibly tedious. And as you can see, we're adding loads of these. I mean, we could go in the other direction as well. We could go 20, 60, and draw one a little bit lower. Now that's gone higher. Okay, what have I done? I did, oh, there we go. 60 there, and what if we want one at, we want 60, and then we want to fill this gap in here, so we need 60, 60. You know, maybe we want one at 20 and then 100. You know, if I want to fill this whole grid, I need a lot of lines. We've only got a few circles there. I mean, there's dozens and dozens to do. Okay, so this obviously isn't a good way of doing it. How do we do it a different way? Well, let's do a for loop. Now, for loops work this way. So you've got looks a bit like an if statement, and I write the word for. Oh, one thing I'm going to do, okay, it's got an error. Now, as I write a for loop, it's going to come up with errors until I finish writing it. And when these get a bit more complicated, because for loops make things happen lots and lots of times, it occasionally crashes the editor if auto refresh is on. I'm going to turn that off. It kind of gets confused halfway through doing it, and as I'm typing it's trying to redo it, so turn that off while you're doing for loops. There's my top tip for you. So they kind of look like this. They've got two parentheses, then after that they've got two curly brackets. Now it's reminding me I need to do some stuff in here. So first of all, in this for loop, what do I write? So first of all, I need to make a variable. So let I equal 0. So I've made a variable called I, that it's equal to 0. And I put a semicolon. And then I have a conditional. So we've talked about conditional statements like if statements. So let's say, let's have I is less than 10. So while I is less than 10, this thing's going to keep happening. Now I want to make I bigger each time. So I can write I equals I plus 1. Now remember, I said there's another way of writing this. You can actually write I plus equals 1, or you can just write I plus plus. Now, doesn't really matter what way you do it here. I'm going to write I plus plus for now. You can just squish it all together like that. So what's going to happen in here is something's going to happen inside here. And it's still got an error up there, but it's okay because we haven't hit that yet. So let's draw a circle now. Let's draw a circle, and let's, you know, do it at 20, 20, 20 pixel diameter. Press play. And we've just got one circle there. Okay. Now that's a lot of writing for just having one circle. But what's going on? Now we're actually drawing a circle 10 times here. How do we know that? Let's do a little bit of console logging. So console log. Let's write a bit of text. I've drawn a circle. Close all that. Remember I talked about this last time, but console log will print stuff down here. So right, I've drawn a circle. It's happening a lot of times, and that's because we're also inside the draw loop, and this draw loop's happening 30 times a second. So this is happening a lot. Now we could see how many times it's happening by actually removing this. Let's cut it. Let's stick it in here and get rid of that background. Let's try again. Right, 10. I've drawn a circle. That tells you this line's been printed 10 times in this for loop. Right, so we could actually do everything in the setup here if we're not animating. It's going to make things a bit simpler for now. So we've got a circle. We're not animating, so we're just going to do it all in setup for now. And it's drawn 10 circles, but they're all in the same place. You just see one. Now how do we make them kind of go that way? Well, we know we've got this thing called I, so we could also console log I. Let me do that instead. Console log I and hit play again. Right, now it's printed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 things starting at 0, going to 9. And that's because we've said, right, at the beginning of the loop, let I equals 0. We've made a variable called I. You could call this anything, but we called it I. Just that's convention, actually. Like when you do for loops, you often use I. Let I equals 0, so I starts as 0. And then we're saying while I is less than 10, keep going. And actually at the end of here, sort of just here, this last bit happens, I++. I gets bigger by 1. And that's why the first run through, I is 0. And then it goes down, and it loops again, and then eventually gets to 9. Okay, so I is a number between 0 and 9. So what can we do with that? Well, we could replace the x value here with I. Let's see what happens then. Hit play. Oh, so right. That looks a bit weird, doesn't it? But what's actually happened, we've drawn a circle there at 0, and then we've drawn 10 of them. The last circle is at 10 pixels across, and you see actually our circle's 20 pixels in diameter, and you see it's fully on the screen eventually. So, but it looks a bit weird, right? I mean, we've got an I thing in here, but let's just multiply that. So let's put asterisk, which is multiply in code language. You can't do x for multiply because x is a letter. So we use an asterisk for multiply. Let's multiply it by 20. Hit play. Right, so the first one's at 0, so the first time this goes down here, we've done the setup, we draw the canvas, we make a background which is grey, then we are in our for loop. Now first of all we make a variable called I, and it's 0. Is 0 less than 10? Yep. So we go down here, we draw a circle at 0 times 20, 0 times 20 is 0, and then it makes a circle that's just here. And then we're logging out the value of I. And then at the very end here, so after the last thing, just before this closing bracket, 1 gets added to I. And it goes back through. Now I is 1. 1 times 20 is 20, so then the next one's at 20, etc. Right? And it draws 10 of these things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Right. It's all working. So what I could do is make each one 30 pixels away from the last one. And they get a bit wider, right? And I can increase this number and make them 40 pixels away and get a bit wider still. Now what I could do this a different way, and I'm going to, because having this multiplying down here is a bit strange. So what we could do is just make it I. Instead of I++, which has 1 each time, I could have I plus equals 40. So I is getting bigger by 40 each time. And then hit play. Now, it's only done 1. So what's happened there? Well, the first time through it said I 0. If I is less than 10, carry on. Right, it is less than 10. So it draws a circle. And then it adds 40, so now I is 40. And then it goes back through and says, is I less than 10? Well, I is 40, so no, it's not. So it's just, so then we stop the loop. So what we have to do is say I is less than what? Now I'm going to use the canvas width here. So I could type in 400 and they all come back. And if you remember from last time, I could also type in width, which takes the canvas width. So I'm going to do that instead, because that then allows me to make the canvas bigger or smaller. So I can make the canvas bigger. And look, I get more circles because it's related to the canvas width. Make it 600. Well, I'm going to keep it 400, but you get the idea. So this width thing's kind of handy, as I talked about last time. So my other issue is this one's on, it's stuck to there. I want to kind of make it go across a bit. So what can I do? I could just add a number to here. So let's add plus 20. And it shoves them all along. Now they're nicely spaced. That's good. Okay, so I've got a for loop that's drawn 10 circles, and when I is greater than or equal to the width, it stops. It's only going to do this while I is less than the width. And we're adding 40 each time. Now the reason I'm adding 40 each time is because I want to space them in a certain way. And it just happens that the width, 400, divided by 40 is 10. So I get exactly 10. But I've also got this thing in here. So I could even do width over 10. So I always get 10. No matter how big my width is. So I make my width smaller, they're going to be closer together. We'll make my width bigger, they're going to be further apart. So there's lots of there are 10 there, let's go with that. See, so, but I'm going to keep things simple for now. Let's just leave that 400 and that 400. We talked about variables last time. I'm going to make that 40, so you can just keep it simple for now. There we go, there's 10 in there. And that's 10, but look, I said I was going to make 100. So how do we do that? Well, what we've got is a loop, and the loop draws a row. Just one row. Now what if we wanted to do another row, then another row, then another row, then another row? Well, let's wrap this loop in another loop, and then we'll get rows and columns, and on it goes. We've got a two-dimensional surface here, x and y, so 2 for loops will draw in both dimensions. So now this, by the way, this will probably work fine if you have auto refresh turned on, but when you nest for loops, that's why I turn off auto refresh. It kind of goes crazy. It won't now, but let's write another for loop. Let's write it we're going to write it in the same way. So say let I equals 0. Now you might notice a problem here, but we're going to correct that. 400 I plus equals 40. So we've got 2 for loops and they're identical. Now both use I, but we want one to use a different letter, so let's make this one J. Why J? Well, it's one letter bigger than I, and I is kind of your default. So we're going to just check it still works. This first loop's doing nothing at the moment, and the second loop, we've just changed it all to J. Now this one's drawing 1 row. Now if I want 10 rows, I'm going to stick this for loop inside the other one. So let's cut that and paste it there. And I'm going to just jog that along and jog these along just by hitting tab and make things a little bit more readable. So now I've got a loop inside a loop, right? So I'm going to write some comments. So this one is going to be vertical loop, and this one is going to be my horizontal loop. There we go. So the horizontal loop is working fine, but what about the vertical loop? Now we've got a variable I and a variable j. Now we've chosen to use the variable j now for the x position. So the vertical loop, let's use the variable I for that. So I'm going to put in I there for my y position for my circle. Get rid of this console log, I don't need it now. And hit play. Right, now I've got a whole grid. So what's happening? Well, first of all, let's fix a thing. So you see how they're stuck to the top there. I'm going to add 20, so we're always adding 20 onto that I position. Now I could have switched those I and J's around actually, that might have made more sense, but it doesn't really matter. So what's happening is we run setup, we hit play, setup gets run, we make a canvas, we make the background, then we get to here. Right, I is 0. Is I less than 400? Yep. So run that for loop one time, and that runs one whole row. All get made by that loop like last time. And then we go around the outer loop again. Now, I plus equals 40, so 40 gets added to I. So now I is 40, and then we run this whole loop again. But the next time round, I is 40, right? Here's I. It's our X position of the circle and our Y position of the circle. But our Y position has got to 40, so 40 plus 20 is 60. So now the I position, the Y position, and the I value is larger, so it draws that whole row. It runs this whole loop again 10 times and draws that whole row, and so on, and draws. We each time we draw a row, increment the outer loop, and we draw the next row. Then we increment this loop and draw the next row. So we get this grid. So we can sort of see what's happening here by just changing things. I mean, we could make instead of 400, we could maybe only draw. Let's only draw down to here or something. We'll make this value smaller. Let's call it 300. Hit play. So it's drawing fewer rows now. So we can see that our vertical loop, let's just draw half the screen. And that essentially is how you make a grid with nested for loops. Now we can make this a little bit more exciting, but for now, that's doing the job. Now what I'm going to do is, I wanted to show you it in the setup function here because it was making our console log easier, but let's cut all of this and paste it back in the draw bit. And it works just the same. It's not changing anything, but we can, it sort of means that a few things are going to work a bit better. Now I want to change the color of these. So how do I change the color of the circle? Well, by default, color is in red, green, blue, or grayscale. So I type in fill, and I can make them grayscale, say by doing 200. Hit play, and they all get a bit darker, right? So I'm in grayscale here. I can make it 20, and they go really dark. Or I can do it in RGB. So let's put two more values in there, 30 to 200. And now they've gone blue. Let's make that bigger as well, 200. And they've gone pink. Right, I can get rid of the stroke. You see the black line around there? I can just type in no stroke. And now there's no stroke around them. But there's some other stuff I can do. So if I want to learn a bit more about this, let's go to the reference. So I've already gone there, and I've searched for color mode. Now color mode, you can change it. RGB is a standard. But I can also use HSB. It's just another mode. Rather than red, green, blue, it's hue, saturation, brightness. And the second value here, which in this case is 100, is what do you want it to be out of. So what I said before was these values are all out of 255 by default. But if I write this in here, color mode HSB, I'm going to make it out of 400. So you can put any number you want here, but I'm going to say it's out of 400, so 0 in hue is going to be one color, and the far end of that color range is going to be 400. So now I'm going to press play. Look, this has kind of gone weird. Like what's happened here? So it's HSB now. So this is the hue, that's the saturation, and that's the brightness. What happens if I make saturation and brightness 400? Hit play again. Right, so saturation and brightness are now full. So let's make this 400 as well. It's red. Okay, let's make it 0. It's also red. Well, that's interesting. HSB is a fun thing to use because the hue is actually a loop. So as I'll make the hue bigger. So let's make it 10. It's gone a bit more orangey. Let's make it 100. It's gone to green. 200. It's gone to blue. 300. It's gone to kind of a purpley colour. 400. It's gone back to red again. So as I increase the hue, it goes through this rainbow loop, which is kind of fun. So what I can do instead of typing a number in here, I'm going to make it I. So now it's out of 400. So now it's going through a rainbow, starting at the top there and going down to the bottom. And what I could also do is use the J here, and I put J as saturation. So now I've got desaturated here through to saturated on the left. And this shows you that you can not only modify position, but you could also modify color it within the for loops using these variables. And you could modify other stuff as well, right? I could easily modify the size of the circle. If I put the circle size as I there, they're going to start off small and get bigger, but they kind of go a bit dramatic. So let's just divide it by something. Let's divide by 100. See what that does. Too much. Okay, 10. Okay, so now they start to get bigger as they go down. There's all kinds of stuff you could do here, all kinds of ways you could play with this. But as a recap, what we've done here is we've created a canvas, again, 400 by 400, and then we've used a loop to draw lots of things. And in this case, it's a kind of very classic way of doing looping. We've got a loop within a loop, which lets you draw in 2 dimensions and make loads of things, make a grid. And this is one of the fundamental bits of creative coding. And you might want to learn more about this, and if you do, there's lots of resources out there. So W3 Schools has got some great stuff on loops, and you could look at that. And again, they have various tutorials that you can try yourself here, and we'll give you a bit more of the detail on it. But I always like doing my coding in a visual way so I can see the result, and I think once you can actually see things and use something like p5 to see what's going on, it really helps you learn it. That's all for now. Thanks very much.